Good afternoon and welcome along. I'm here actually inside the cottage today. The weather quality outside is unbelievably poor, but join me for a live Rose Q&A today. Please feel free to ask me your questions. I'm going to be live here on YouTube for several moments, answering any of your rose related questions as we approach the end of National Rose Month. It's been an absolutely glorious month here in the UK, one of the hottest Junes on record since records began, thinking since 1836 or something ridiculous. It's been unbelievably warm and unbelievably dry, meaning the rose season has been utterly glorious. I hope you've enjoyed all of the content that has come so far. As I explained in a recent Instagram live, you're going to be lacking several live rose reviews from myself. I'm fallen short on my quota this year, but they will be coming over the next couple of weeks, and then the reformulation of my David Austin top 20 and several of my best of collections. And if there's something that you would like to see, if there's some roses you would like to see side by side, some comparisons, whether it's different size shrubs or whether it's different colors, or whether you'd like to see a selection of certain forms together or fragrances brought together, please still feel free to approach me. Drop me a comment either here on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram using the same username. That's _Gardener Ben. You can send me a direct message there if you feel more comfortable. So if there's something you'd like to see compared, something you'd like to be brought together, please feel free to ask me a question. But so far this month, you've seen reviews from me. Now, forgive me for reading this because there is quite a few of them. You've seen reviews from Fragonard, Paul's Noel, Leah Tutu, Todgmeister, the Macmillan Nurse Rose from Peter Beals, This Morning, William and Catherine, Bathsheba. We've also reviewed Ivor's Rose, The Rambler, Bobby James, Fellowship, Elizabeth, The Stunning Bring Me Sunshine, St. Ethelberger, Simple Peach, Debbie Phillips, Wisley 2008, Claire Marshall, Hyde Hall, then The Pilgrim, Young Lucidius, and Golden Celebration. Outstanding from myself is still James Galway, Maid Marian, and Jane Austen. Those are the ones that haven't been done just yet, but they will be done over the next couple of weeks as those shrubs really get themselves away. You will then get my first impressions of two new releases from David Austin. One, obviously, you're already aware of. One is obviously Donahue. That's Donahue, not Danahue as it's spelt. Donahue, you will have a first impressions video of that and a full personal review next year in 2024. And then we are expecting another world exclusive here on my YouTube and Instagram channel of the new release from David Austin Roses, very excitingly now coming next week. We're hopefully winging its way to me over the next few days. Be launched at the Hampton Court Palace Flower Show on Tuesday. Not sure of the time, I haven't had the press release just yet, but we are expecting exciting news from David Austin. So if you haven't already hit the subscribe button, make sure that you head up to the top of my profile here on YouTube and hit subscribe, and make sure then you hit subscribe and you're up to date with all of the latest information of that new release. I'm actually going to be at Hampton Court myself. Hampton Court Palace Show will be there on Tuesday, doing a little bit of live filming. Obviously, lots of roses for me to have a look at, including the new release, which I would have seen by then anyway, but it'll be nice to bring you my first thoughts and impressions from Hampton Court. I haven't attended that show in quite some time, so I'm very much looking forward to that. So if you are attending the Hampton Court Palace Flower Show and you see me wandering around, please feel free to say hi. That's on Tuesday, the 4th of July. Right, let's see whether we've got some questions coming up. This is always a bit strange because I have to keep my camera by. So if you have asked a question, I think your questions have completely disappeared. Please feel free to ask them again. Here on YouTube, orientation of the camera is slightly different, so everything disappears really rather quickly when you're in landscape mode. So if you do have a question, please feel free to ask it to me. Just wet the whistle, but it has been a very, very busy National Rose Month. Well, several questions just popped up there, but I don't know where they've gone. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, well, they've disappeared. Not sure where they've gone. Anyway, so if you do have a question, please feel free to jump on and ask me again because they have disappeared. I will endeavour to stop rambling and answer the question as they pop up on the screen. YouTube is really quite difficult. It's not as easy a platform when you're dealing with a mobile telephone device as we are here. It's much easier if you're pre-filming stuff, which is not particularly great. It's not the way that I plan to do stuff here. So yes, I have already out. Trying again. Can you say something about picking roses for the house, please? That's from Julie. Yes, of course, I can give you some information about picking roses for the house. Very specifically, if we're here to talk about David Austin roses, the David Austin collections aren't fantastic for cutting and bringing into the house. You will get a very, very limited vase life. They're not bred like a commercial grown rose would be. They're actually bred for disease resistance and fragrance and form and colour out in the garden. And as soon as you cut that rose, bringing it into the house, you're a very, very limited time span. You can actually elongate the cutting time and the vase life by doing several things. Make sure that you pick them early on in the morning, out in your dressing gown and your slippers with your hair rollers in, whatever you want to do. But something in the region of about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, just before the heat of the day starts. Pick them just at a very, very close stage. Don't be tempted to pick things like this. This is young Lucidius. I actually reviewed this several days ago. This bloom is well and truly blown and spent. I will come back to that question about Munstead wood in just a second, but this bloom is actually blown and spent. You want to get them just as they break colour. They will continue to open in the vase for you. Do make sure that you then, once you've cut them, you put them straight into water. So you're out in the garden early in the morning with a bucket or a jug or something that you can cut and put the stems straight into cold water. Once you bring them into the house, recut the stems just by about 1/2 inch to 1 inch. And if you can, keep them out of direct sunlight, or just like me, you cut them, bring them into the house and enjoy them for the very, very limited time that they are about for. But some varieties cut much, much better than others. If you're interested, please search here on YouTube and cut them and bring them into the house. Search here on YouTube for my best of for fragrance and best of for cutting selection, or you can head over to my Instagram channel and you'll find it up in the top of my story highlights. So head to the top of my profile, _Gardener Ben, scroll through my whole story highlights. There is a group of best of selections. There's a best for cutting range there, which includes Emily Bronte as the star of that particular one. Several roses going to be added to that collection this year. Through vase trials in the house, several are going to be added to that collection this year, so that will be reworked in early July. Now, again, those not normally done that late, but everything is very advanced this year. This unbelievable heat that we've had through June has really pushed things over the edge and completely disappeared. So everything in the garden is taking a little bit of a well-earned rest. Right, so somebody asked a question a second ago whether there was a suitable substitute for Munstead wood. And actually, funny enough, he's actually here. This is the only real rose that David Austin can offer you now that is going to be a substitute for Munstead wood. And this one does actually rival the fragrance of Munstead wood. The colour is not quite so deep. It is more of a sort of got a cherry or a pink tinge to it. That's not that deep red cassis colour that you're used to with Munstead wood. But this is young Lucidius from David Austin Roses, reviewed by myself a few days ago. This one is particularly lovely, really, really nice. The fragrance on this one is unparalleled now within the David Austin collections. This one's scoring with me a good 8 on the fragrance rating over 9. There is only one 8.5 and one other 9 out there, so this is a really good one. So if you're looking for a substitute for Munstead wood, which is now completely discontinued on the sell-through worldwide, young Lucidius is the rose to look for. Right, a question just popped up on the screen about teasing Georgia, and yes, I do have teasing Georgia, and there should be somewhere here on YouTube a review for it. If I fail to review it, I need to check my list. I may not have done it, so it might be one that I can actually squeeze in this year for you. Now, unfortunately, discontinued here in the UK. Teasing Georgia, much like Graham Thomas, very, very similar roses. They're very difficult to tell apart. A really lovely soft yellow rose colour, 11 rose, with very, very soft lime green foliage, actually out in full flower in the garden, actually, just at the moment, looking really, really lovely. The only thing I will say about teasing Georgia, it's a very upright and woody shrub, stands up quite healthily, and then the flowers nod like that. So if you're familiar with, for instance, Thomas A. Beckett, which again stands upright and then the blooms hang on the tops of very woody stems, teasing Georgia is very similar. She is unfortunately just a little bit prone to black spot and unfortunately mold and mildew. So you do need to make sure you look after her well. You do need to make sure that you mulch it very, very deeply and pay attention to your watering. So teasing Georgia is lovely. The fragrance on that one is particularly good. With me live, I can't actually go through. I think I've reviewed 105 now, so it's quite a lot. I can't remember if Teasing Georgia is in there, but I will check. And if I haven't done that, that is a review that I might be able to squeeze in for you and actually pop up onto the internet for you over the next couple of days, because it is in the garden. It is looking absolutely fabulous at the moment. Does anybody have any further questions for you? So, David, not a problem at all. I hope that's answered your question for you. But yeah, the garden is looking a little bit quiet. But apart from that, Teasing Georgia is one of the only roses that's actually got any blooms on it at the moment. So very, very brutal on the deadheading. We had a little bit of rain here. Only enough rain really to get everything wet, not actually do anything really purposeful with, but it was enough to send that first flush. It really did come down very quickly for about half an hour. I think we yielded about 2 or 3 millimeters, but it was enough to get everything wet and just knock the petals off of everything. So I have completely deadheaded the garden. I've completely taken all of the blooms off and let it have a little bit of a rest. So does anybody have any further questions for us today? Julie, am I planning to open my garden this year? I'm not opening this year, unfortunately. I don't know if you follow on Instagram. You won't see a huge amount of information here on YouTube about it, because I keep the two channels as different as I can. But if you do follow over on Instagram, it's the_garden, the Ben, same username. You'll know that we're still in the middle of building the retaining wall. Actually, if I look this way, through the French doors just behind me is the lounge, and behind that is the new retaining wall and the sunken patio. I knew that if I didn't get that patio laid before the beginning of June, it was going to have to wait till August, and that's exactly what's happened. I did finish the wall. It took me weeks and weeks and weeks and months, but I have finished the wall. I haven't finished the patio. The patio is scheduled to go down. It's all here. The sand is here, the cement's here, the cement mix is here, the paving's here. But I haven't finished the paving. Until I finish the paving, we weren't going to open the garden. Unfortunately, I've got two now dead trees in the garden. I've got two juvenile elm trees, which have both succumbed to Dutch elm disease. So they need to come down. We also said a very, very sad goodbye several months ago to our chickens, our rising timed restraints, really. My husband away from work an awful lot now, away from the house, and me very busy here on the internet and with the garden and obviously working full time. We decided that actually this year we just simply weren't going to be ready to open the garden. So long and short of it is, we will open in 2024. I will make sure that I signpost an awful lot about it. Hopefully we'll smash apart the I'm glad you enjoyed it last time. Thank you very much for coming. But no, 2024, we will open the garden, and we make sure we advertise it heavily. Hopefully, smash apart that number we had. I think we had a staggering over 1,000 of you through the garden last time. Absolutely amazing, raising an awful lot of money for charity. I think it was a thick end of about £5,500 we raised for charity. But we will open in 2024, I promise you. Either do it once or maybe even do it twice to get as many of you through the North Lost Cottage Garden as possible. But yeah, I had a funny idea that I wasn't going to get through everything this year, and I'm glad I actually went on the side of caution on that one. Okay, so Cosmos asking, when will the new top 20 be out? Well, the new 20. Bear with a second, I'm just reading this comment before it disappears. The new top 20 was actually due about now, if I'm honest, but unfortunately everything has gone over and I don't really have any blooms to show you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold back on that one. I know some of you might actually get a little bit frustrated waiting for the information on that one, but it's as soon as I have, I don't know, 15, 16, 17 of them in flower, I will bring you my new top 20. What I want to do is I want to have everything to my hand. I can walk around the garden and show you them individually as I've ranked them, or I would like to have a really nice amount of them cut, and like a video last year and the year before where you had lots of blooms. So I'd like to make it as interactive as possible, and I'd like to be able to show you as many flowers just as soon as I can. So that top 20, although I already know what the ranking is in my head, and no, I'm not going to tell you, yeah, it will be somewhere in July. It's going to be, I don't know, everything's gearing itself up with the second flush. I mean, Tranquility is unbelievable. I only deadheaded it on Friday and the buds are already there. But yeah, this season has been really, really hard. And I know a lot of you are focusing very heavily on your questions to me about black spot, mold, mildew, even some leaf drop and bud drop on things. This season has been brutal, really, really hard work if you're a rose out in the garden. So I'm hoping to bring you the new top 20 just as quickly as I can. It will hopefully be in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, it will be sooner than that. But I also those last few reviews to bring you as well. So let's say there's 3 or 4 still due. Jane Austen, Maid Marian, James Galway, the most important ones are those, and first impressions of Donahue and the new release due next week. Okay, so someone asking me, the question has disappeared. It's very frustrating. They do disappear really quickly before I can read them. Your blooms on your Claire Austin remained small and never opened properly. By the sounds of things, it's bald. Claire Austin is really problematic with balling. She has a what we call a deeply cupped bowl. There's outside petals are actually larger than inner petals, so they actually enclose the bloom. And if they don't actually manage to open properly, they actually get stuck together. So probably what you've experienced is you've had several showers of rain. Those outer petals, because they're wafer thin, they're literally like tracing paper. If you get small amounts of moisture in between them, they stick together and then they can't actually open. The flower actually almost sort of chokes itself. So they'll go all brown and spotty and then almost sort of shrivel up on themselves. And that's unfortunately because they've balled. So they've got wet just as they open. Unfortunately, it's just one of those things that some roses are better than others. Unfortunately, Claire Austin is one of the worst in the David Austin collections for doing that, as is the Wedgwood rose, which again has that huge sort of pointed flower, slightly different shape. It's not as round and bulbous as Claire Austin. It's actually more pointed, but it does have hundreds of petals on the outside, which they do get stuck together. And unfortunately, yes, then they're left balled up. You need to deadhead it. Unfortunately, remove those flowers completely. Put them into the compost bin. Unfortunately, they're particularly ruined, unfortunately. Right. So the truth. My Ulwick roses change colour from pink to red. Hmm. That's not normally the way it goes. Normally, the Ulwick rose goes from peachy salmon to a very, very light pink. Um, Not sure what's happened with your Ulwick rose there. Normally, it can be explained by heat. So you've either gone two ways. Your temperatures have either gone very, very cold, or they've gone very, very hot. Or worst case scenario is you've allowed some growth to come from the union, and you're no longer growing the Ulwick rose, and you're actually growing something off of the rootstock. So just check your growth on the Ulwick rose if it has changed colour that drastically, and just have a look right down at the bottom of the plant and make sure you haven't got any stems emerging from below ground level. And if you have, then trace back which ones are which. So check all the stems and see whether all the leaf configurations are the same. For instance, on this one here, this one is obviously, who have we got? Talking about it in a second ago. This one is young Lucidius. You should have pairs of leaves in even numbers. If you've got different pairs of leaves, as in six or five, yes, you can then make sure that you've got the right rows. If not, just make sure that it hasn't suckered and you're not growing something else from down the actual bottom of the plant. And if you are growing something else, unfortunately, it does mean that you are going to have to cut those and remove it. If you don't mind, I'm going to try and orientate my screen a little bit differently and try and turn you. Oh, it's not going to let me. It's saying I can't do that. Your questions are literally disappearing in about 3 seconds. So I had one there about young Lucidius, and I can't actually read it. It's disappeared because we were still too busy talking about the Ulwick rose, which has changed colour. But yeah, you do need to make sure that you're growing the right rose and you haven't grown something from underground and it's just crept up on you, and then you've got two different plants. You'll often find that the rootstock, if you have got that, will actually grow a lot faster than the graft above ground. So you'll end up, unfortunately, very, very rapidly ending up with a completely different plant that you might not notice have grown. Normally, they do try and graft with a different leafed union than they do to the top growth. So you should normally be able to tell them apart. The foliage should look very, very different, and normally they are completely different colours. So do check that the rose has the right form, as in the flower looks correct, it's the right shape, and then trace it back to the rootstock and see whether you have not, unfortunately, been growing something that you may not have unwittingly bought. It might be the rootstock coming through. But normally the Ulwick rose goes the other way. It opens a nice deep salmon pink colour with a lovely sort of apricot tinge to it, and then it normally bleaches out. It's very unusual for it to go the other way. I'm not sure what country you're in or what rootstock it'll be grafted onto, but by the sounds of things, you've got something coming from below ground, and it might actually be a completely different plant that you're growing. Right, keep those questions coming, guys, because obviously we are approaching the end of National Rose Month now. Been very, very busy month indeed. Oh, on a personal note, I've managed to get myself very run down. It was stinking cold last week. horrible sty on the right eye, which has been really, really scratchy. So if I look like a pirate, unfortunately, it's just because I've got myself overly tired. Been spending hours and hours, as you can expect, welded to my phone, trying to interact with as many of you as possible during this month. Very, very busy, especially on the run up to Hampton Court, getting lots of questions answered and doing as many of these events as possible. So if you did ask a question a second ago about young Lucidius, please feel free to pop it on the screen again. I say these questions, unfortunately, disappearing really, really rather quickly here, only lasting on the screen a couple of seconds. Again, got dust in my eye, straight home from work. I did mention earlier on in the live stream that if there is anything particular that you'd like to see in comparison wise, this coming towards the end of the month, please feel free to bung me a question. We're either here on YouTube or go over to Instagram and send me a direct message if there are some roses that you'd like to see directly compared, or if there's a lineup of different colors you'd like to see. Don't forget that all of my best of selections are up in my story highlights on my Instagram channel, or you can find them here on YouTube at any time if you have an interest. There's lots and lots for you to watch. I say over 105 reviews done so far, which means, unfortunately, if you are over on Instagram looking for those, they have started falling off the end. I've tried reposting those to give as many of you an option of watching those as possible, but there's only 100 spaces across the top of that bar. So now we've done 105. Unfortunately, the early ones, for instance, the Lady Gardener, she's still there. If you have a look under the sections and collections, all grouped together under National Rose Month, I think 2021 she was done. But unfortunately, it has fallen off the end of the actual story highlights. But I'm trying to repost those for you. But if anybody has a garden, there we go, right. Okay, so first one is about Princess Alexandra of Kent question has disappeared before I can read it. I just read the top line. But you're dealing with climbers for the very first time. So, okay, I need to prepare you for this. There's no easy way of saying it. If you've ever had a puppy or if you've ever had a child, prepare yourself for a very, very similar stage with a climbing or rambling rose. They go through a very much a juvenile stage, normally in their second, third, fourth years. They get all lumpy and bumpy. They get a bit large. They don't really quite know what they're doing. You can't really train them. Everything's a little bit unruly and a little bit untidy. You just need to be prepared for that and grow through it. In the first year, 2 years, all you want to be doing is getting as much growth on your plant as possible. Don't worry too much about your pruning. Don't worry too much about getting flowers or getting it tidy. You want to get your plant established. Don't forget, please, that anybody buying a rose is a long-term investment. We're talking something that's going to be in your garden for 15 years plus. The first year or two is always about getting those roses established. And if you are growing against a wall or you're growing against a building, please be very careful with your placement of your okay. I'm going to make a note of that. Okay, so yeah, you be careful of if you're planting against a wall, because you must make sure that you're mulching the entire root zone. Walls have a tendency to really suck the moisture out of the soil. Foundations made of concrete will really dry the soil out, so you do need to be very careful with your watering. But in the first couple of years, really focus on getting that plant established, getting it well away, getting it really, really well established and set up. And then I will guide you through your pruning of those roses in, well, January, February, and again the previous year. I'm going to be doing those as live events here again on YouTube and on Instagram. So do look out for those. I'm going to do those several times as well. So don't worry if you missed the first one. I'll always post it to my grid on either platform. So there's plenty for you to watch. But on the first few years, it's about getting yourself established and getting it really, really strong and away. If you have got some nice new canes being produced, those will be coming up from the growth from the bottom. And quite often get a message saying, "Shall I cut it off?" It's like, goodness me, don't cut it off. That's your new growth. That's going to support. That's going to make up your framework for previous type or prep next year. So make sure all you do at this stage is tie that in loosely with some twine just to keep it out of the way. So if it's on a path or getting in the way of a window, for instance, just loosely tie it back to your supports with some twine, and then we'll deal with those in January and February for you during your normal pruning. Right, so a question that was asked the second day, you'd like a lineup of, it looks like to me, like apricot shades. So you'd like the lineup of Donahue, which I can do. I'm going to make some notes of that. Donahue, Bring Me Sunshine, and Crown Princess Margarita. I could also add to you the other apricots, so lining up for you the likes of the Lark Ascending, Who else have we got? We've got Rolled Doll could go into that selection as well. Again, teasing Georgia, although she's slightly more on the yellow side, but I could certainly bring you a collection of those. So yes, we could certainly look at a sort of an apricot selection for you. That wouldn't be a problem at all. Obviously, if you're here in the UK, as some of you are, not all of you, I don't know who's online at the moment, but if you're here in the UK, unfortunately, Crown Princess Margarita, although she ranks incredibly high with me, I've got my list in front of me at the moment, my top 20 from last year. Crown Princess Margarita, she ranks. Scrolling. Can't find her. She does rank within the top 20 at the moment, but unfortunately, that means this year because she's discontinued here in the UK. It doesn't mean I think any less of the rose, but I'm going to be trying to focus on roses that you can actually physically buy. So if you're in Europe and you're in America, Texas, China, Australia, New Zealand, wherever you may be joining us from that year, David Austins are available. Crown Princess Margarita, she's discontinued here in the UK, so she will rank somewhere. Think very, very highly of me. Yes, I so yeah, and she's not available. So I'm going to try and make sure that I focus on roses that you are aware of and you can start thinking about buying. So yeah, that's that for you. So yes, certainly I can do that lineup for you. That's not a problem at all. So do look out for that selection. That will be an apricot selection, including Bring Me Sunshine, Donahue, and then what was the other one on that? Crown Princess Margarita. Okay, so those will be lined up for you soon enough. As soon as I got some plants in flower, we'll do that for you. Right, that's a question popped up and disappeared then about a rambling rose, which has now disappeared. So I'm really sorry with the orientation of the screen this way. If I have my screen round the right way, as in portrait, the way I prefer to work it, I get loads of messages saying, "Get the screen round." This way round is unmanageable. I'm never doing it this way again. My questions disappear within seconds. I can't even read them properly. So if you did ask a question, I'm really sorry. It's disappeared off the screen again. Please do ask it again. It was something to do with a rambler or a climber. I couldn't read any more before it disappeared off the screen. And I've tried turning the camera around. Okay, so something about Mark and Ethel de Holland. Unfortunately, the latter one of those is not one that I actually have. I do have the Rambling Rose Ethel. It's unfortunately not in flower yet. It might make it to flower. That's actually one from Peter Beale's roses here in the UK. That one hasn't made it to flowering just yet, but hopefully will make it to flowering, and hopefully I'll be able to bring you a review of that one over the next few weeks. I must confess, it's got itself away very, very quickly. A lot of growth on it. It's about 5.5 feet high already, and it only went in the ground, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. It's really got itself away quickly. So yeah. Okay, so someone's actually answering somebody else's question. So obviously someone, I think somewhere along the lines, is actually seeing the questions fast and I, because on my screen I say it disappeared. So someone's suggesting that actually Mark has a look at Madame Alfred Carrière. Okay, and someone else saying that young Lucidius is temperamental. Yeah, unfortunately, yes, it is a little bit temperamental. I did make it quite clear in my review that he is a little bit prone to leaf drop and he is a little bit prone to mold and mildew, very much like Munstead Wood was in its early seasons with me. Now, Munstead Wood is, what is it, about a 10-year-old plant, a really great big thumping, great big thorny thing. And once I got it fully established, its first few years, unfortunately, were very, very temperamental. But I'm assuming that young Lucidius, this rose here, is a little bit like the same. My plant is quite young, so do persevere with it. Make sure you give it plenty of mulch and water it well. Mine is in, where is mine? Just trying to think about the location of the garden. No, it's in full sun. It's on a west-facing aspect, so it's getting plenty of sun. Is irrigated, but I say it has had a little bit of a checkered start to things. So yes, unfortunately, young Lucidius has been a little bit temperamental and is slowly to getting itself set up. But do give it some time. It's a really lovely rose, but unfortunately, you will find with these very, very strongly scented roses producing blooms the size that, yeah, I mean, this is, I mean, I keep showing it, but it's a really large flower. It's about coming on for 4 inches across. It really is quite large. When they're producing flowers that big, they often are a little bit unpredictable and they will actually suffer with a little bit of black spot and sometimes a little bit of droop. So yeah, do go easy with it. Give it a little bit of time to get itself set up and established, and hopefully it will reward you for years to come. I'm very much looking forward to it. I must admit, this one, the colour is, I can't stop staring at it. It's actually really very beautiful. It's a cross between Thomas A. Becket in colour and Princess Anne with that lovely silver edging to the back. Really, really very interesting. And the fragrance on it is absolutely stunning. Hopefully, we can get a little bit of this nod out of the flowers, but we'll see. If it does nod and it does droop a little bit, well, I'll give it some support. But at the moment, it looks to be doing quite okay. Right. Any more further questions coming through? If we haven't got anything else today, I'm going to stop today's live. Unfortunately, next time you join me, I will make sure I have my camera up the other way, and you will all have to deal with the fact that the screen isn't orientated properly. But it does mean that I will be able to read those questions better when they actually roll on. So if anybody else has a question before I log off, please feel free to ask it. If not, I will see you all again soon. If you miss me, please do free to join me over on Instagram Live. Instagram, obviously, always my chosen platform where I feel most at home, much more interactive. You can find me there using the same username, _GardnerBen, or simply search #GardnerBen on any platform. Or you can get yourself a t-shirt. Anyway, I'll see you all again soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.